Hello again. As you know, I'm Eli the Computer Guy over here for Everyman IT, and today's class is hacking DNS. So today we are going to talk about the basic principles for hacking DNS. Now, this is not a beginner course. If you do not understand what TCP/IP is, go back and learn TCP/IP. You need to have a basic understanding of what TCP/IP is and what DNS is in order to do this class, because basically we're hacking DNS. So if you don't understand DNS, well, it's just no good. So basically, what we're going to talk about today is how you redirect users of computers to different websites using DNS. So as you should know, if you've used DNS before, DNS maps domain names to IP addresses. So basically, you know, if you're trying to go to facebook.com, DNS is what actually allows you to type in www.facebook.com and go to facebook.com's servers. Well, today I'm going to show you how to hack that process so you don't go to facebook.com servers, you go to a hacked website that puts spam or viruses onto your computer, or you just go to nowhere, so it dead ends and you get an error. Basically, the reasons why you should use DNS hacking can either be for very good reasons or for very, very bad reasons. You know, I am Eli the Computer Guy. This is all technology to me, so I'm not going to go into, you know, black hat or white hat. I'm just going to explain to you how this technology or how this hack works. Basically, there are two generally good reasons that you should hack DNS. So these are white hat reasons why you would hack DNS. The first is if you are in a business, or if you have a business and your employees are wasting a lot of time going to like facebook.com, going to yahoo.com, basically going to websites that they have no reason to go to on office time. You know, the boss is paying these people $10, $15, $20, $30 an hour to do their jobs, and instead of doing their jobs, they're going to Facebook. Well, a white hat reason for hacking DNS is if you don't want people going to facebook.com or yahoo.com, etc., you can hack DNS so that they can't get there. So they type in www.facebook.com and they just get an error. Or they go to a web page that says, "Get back to work. We just logged that you try to go to facebook.com." The other legitimate reason that you could hack DNS is because for a lot of web services, if you want to set up a server inside your enterprise that people are coming to from the outside world, well, you cannot loop out of your internal network and back into your internal network through the internet. So this, you know, to prevent hacking, routers do not allow you to go out of your network and back in. So if you have a web server that is sitting inside your network, basically your web server is sitting right beside you. So you have your desk and your web server is right beside you. If you try to use the domain name for that web server, so let's say for everymanit.com, if everymanit.com, that web server is sitting right beside me, literally, or in the same building, if I type in www.everymanit.com onto my computer, that will go out to the internet. But then when it tries to come back in, the router will block it as a security procedure. So you cannot go out and back in. So why you may hack your own DNS is so that instead of, when you type in your website name, you know, like www.everymanit.com, instead of your computer trying to go to the outside world and coming back in, it will simply use the DNS to go to the computer that is right beside you. We'll talk a little bit about that more in a few minutes. And then finally, the black hat reason, I suppose, that you could hack DNS is literally to get people to go to places that they don't necessarily want to go to. So if you hack their DNS, let's say for a bank website, you know, bankofengland.com or bankofjapan.com or bankofamerica.com, when somebody types in www.bankofamerica.com, instead of actually going to Bank of America's website, You can use DNS hacking to have them go to your website. Then you can do a little phishing attack where when they try to type in their username and password, it doesn't work. You grab their username and password and it's all done. So basically on the black hat side, what you can do is you can either redirect the people to a site that looks like the site that they're trying to go to. So let's say paypal.com or any of that. When they try to type in their credentials, you then grab their credentials. So that's one bad way you can use DNS hacking. Or the other way is that you simply direct them to a site that loads up their computer with viruses and spyware and all kinds of different crap. That is another way that you can hack DNS for bad reasons. So that's the basic idea of what we're going to be going over today. Like I say, it's all pretty simple as long as you understand TCP/IP principles. I do have to say this is an intermediate class. It's not a rank beginner class. So if you don't understand TCP/IP, I mean, you can have this on, but you probably are not going to be understanding what's going on. The final thing, like I say, warning whenever I talk about hacking to me, to the rest of the world, etc. This is a technological course. I am telling you how things technically work. You have to decide what is white hat, what is gray hat, what is black hat, what will keep you out of trouble and what will get you into trouble. I cannot tell you that. I can tell you how to hack DNS. What you do after that is kind of your own business. So this is hacking DNS. Give me a second and we'll dive into this class. So to understand how to hack DNS, we have to go over how DNS works, because a lot of people don't really realize how this works. Now, the first thing that happens, and the first thing that we have to remember and to understand, is that computers do not understand domain names. Facebook.com doesn't actually mean anything to the computer. The computer name server doesn't actually mean anything to the computer. What the computer cares about is the IP address of the computer or the server that you're trying to get to. So what DNS does is it resolves domain names to IP addresses. So basically the DNS server or the DNS will say, okay, www.facebook.com equals IP address 207.88.55.64. That's just made up, but that's basically how it works. And then, so you type in www.facebook.com, your computer goes to the DNS server, asks for the IP address, the DNS server gives it the IP address, and then using that IP address, it then goes to the web server over the internet. So basically, DNS is about resolving domain names to IP addresses. This is very important to understand. Now, how your computer does this is another important thing to understand. So you're sitting, at your computer, and you type into the web browser, www.whatever. Now, in order to resolve the domain name, the first thing that it is going to look for is something called the hosts file. The host file is on every computer that uses TCP/IP as a method of networking. This host file is a local file that contains how to resolve domain names to IP addresses. So within this host file, it'll say, let's say 10.1.10.1 equals server. So if you're trying to go to the computer server, it'll first go to this host file. It'll say, I'm looking for server. The host file will say the IP address is 10.1.10.1, and then your computer will use this to go and to find the server using TCP/IP. So the first thing that your computer always goes to is the hosts file, and that is local on the computer. Within Windows, since time began, it is located at C:\Windows /system. I think it's 32. Yep, 32/drivers/etc, and then and then you find the host file. This is where the host file is located in Windows. C:\Windows system32 drivers etc. You go in there and you will find this host file. So first, Whenever you're trying to navigate using TCP/IP, it will look for the host file. Now, the important thing to remember, this is TCP/IP. This is not simply web browsing. So when you're using DNS, whether you're going to www.facebook.com, that will look in the host file, or if you're trying to go to the local server. So if you have a file server called file server, it will go to the host file first. That's something very important to realize. Any network communication that uses TCP/IP will look at the host file first. Then, once you go to the host file, you generally go to the local DNS server. So depending on the size of your network, this could be any number of things. If you have a small network, you have a home network or a small business with 10 or 20 users, this may be your little DSL modem. So the modem that everybody plugs into to go out to the web may be the local DNS server. If you have a bigger company, let's say you actually use Windows servers, that Windows server may be the local DNS server. It may host all of these DNS files. You may have a Linux server, etc. But basically, once you go from the hosts file, you go to the local DNS. And the local DNS, like I say, you may have it set up on a Windows server. You may have it set up on a router, a little Linksys router. There's a lot of different little boxes that can be the local DNS. The main thing to remember, especially with smaller networks, it's a little different with huge enterprise networks, but basically with smaller networks, is there should only be one box, one physical box that provides the local DNS service. So whether this is, like I say, the router, or whether this is the server, etc., there will only be one computer or one device handling the local DNS. Generally, just to make life easier, whatever is handling your DHCP, so whatever is handing out DHCP IP addresses, is generally what the local DNS server is. It just makes life easier because since the DNS is mapping IP addresses to domain names, it makes things a whole lot simpler if the computer that is handing out IP addresses is the one to catalog everything. Yeah. Then, if the domain name cannot be found in local DNS, you then go out to the public DNS servers, and they will try to figure out where you're trying to go and give you an IP address. So basically, you try to go either to server or www. It looks for the host file. If that domain name isn't found in the host file, it then goes to the local DNS server. If that is not found in the local DNS server, it goes out to the public DNS server. And that is how DNS works. So since we understand the host file and the local DNS and the public DNS, now we just need to, like I say, go over how this works a little bit. So, like I say, when we're looking at the host file, you will have an IP address, let's say 10.1.10.1, and that will point to, let's say, everymanit.com. So if you're trying to go to everymanit.com, it will point you to this IP address. Now, if there is no record for the domain name that you are trying to go to, the computer goes to the next domain name server going out. So basically, if there is no record in the host file for everymanit.com, then your computer will look to the local DNS to try to figure out everymanit.com. If there's no record in the local DNS, then the computer will go out and to the public DNS and see. One of the things that you do have to remember when you're dealing generally with DNS, especially with host files, is that there is no wildcards in it. So you can't just put star.everymanit.com to 10.1.10.1 and make FTP and www and email and, so you can't do this and then expect FTP.everymanit.com to point up here. Wildcards do not work. You have to plug in each record specifically. So if you want everymanit.com to go to 10.1.10.1 and you want www.everymanit.com manit.com, you also have to put that record in. If you want ftp.everyman, you have to put the record in. So that's one of the important things with most of these DNS is that they don't allow wildcards. You actually have to plug in all this information. Now, so how you hack, let's say, for Facebook. So all you do in order to hack, let's say people are trying to go to Facebook and you want to redirect them to this site that is going to put all this virus spyware crap onto their computer. Well, what you can do is in the hosts file that is sitting on their computer, you can say, I want www.facebook.com to go to, I don't know, 208.55.67.1. So what will happen is when people are sitting at the computer, that computer, the first thing it will do is it'll look for the hosts file. It goes to the host file. If it finds a record for Facebook.com in there, it doesn't go any further. It doesn't go to the private DNS. It doesn't go to the public DNS. It goes, okay, I found Facebook.com, and I am going to now go to this IP address. Well, if you've set up the server at the other side of this IP address to do nasty stuff when people go to it, then those people will get nasty things. So basically, if they plug in www.facebook.com, they will automatically get routed to this IP address. Remember, it doesn't go further. So remember, you have the computer, you have the host file, you have the local DNS, and you have the public DNS. The computer keeps looking for that domain name resolution as long as it has not found an answer. It does not double check the answer once it has found an answer. So if it goes to the host file and doesn't find anything, then it goes to the local DNS. If it hasn't found anything, then it goes to the public DNS. But if you can put this line of code into the hosts file on the local computer, then it will go to the host file. It will go, I found my record, and then it will automatically shunt that user over to whatever IP address you gave it. This is true also with the local DNS. So the hosts file only affects that one single computer. So if you go to one computer, you can redirect that one computer with the host file. Well, if you can get into the local DNS server, which is really easy if you know what you're doing. So if you go to a Windows server that is hosting the DNS, you can plug in whatever information you want for Facebook.com, and then anybody on the network trying to go to Facebook.com will be redirected to the IP address that you gave them. So, like I say, if you're trying to be a hacker, then everybody goes off into this 208.55.67.1, and they all get flooded with viruses and spam and spyware and all that. How you can protect your network, though, is either in the host file or the local DNS. Another thing you could do is you could put in an IP address that doesn't work, or an invalid IP address. So you could say www.facebook.com goes to 0.0.0.0. What will happen then is this IP address doesn't resolve to anything. This is a garbage IP address, which means if somebody tries to go to Facebook.com, you will get one of those errors, page not found, because the computer goes, it says, okay, Facebook.com equals 0.0.0.0. It then tries to go to 0.0.0.0, and nothing works. Again, if you're trying to protect one system, you could plug this into the host file. If you're trying to protect your entire network, you would then plug this in to the local DNS server. So basically, if you want nobody on your network to be able to go to Facebook.com, then all you do is you plug in www.facebook.com on your local DNS and you say 0.0.0.0. Now, I'm not going to go into the technical things on how you futz with your local DNS server, because whatever your local DNS server is, you do it different ways. So if you have a Windows local DNS server, you have to futz with it using a Windows console. If you're using Linux, you have to change a configuration file. If you're using some kind of router well, you have to go in and figure it out yourself. But this is the main thing on how you hack DNS. I want to go over to the computer right now, and I will show you how this works. So we are going to go in, we are going to edit the host's file on my Windows 7 computer to show you. This is the Windows 7 fully patched, fully everything. If you change the host file, what I'll show you is instead of going to google.com, you'll go to a site that says, ha, you've been hacked. And I will show you how this works. And really, like I say, I mean, if you do this well, it just works beautifully, and depending on how nefarious your purposes are, it's almost invisible. People really don't understand what's happening until you get somebody like me to come in and figure out what's going on. So now that we understand that, the computer, whenever it's trying to resolve domain names, remember it goes from the hosts to the local DNS to the public DNS, and wherever it finds that record, is where it stops. It does not, once it finds this record in the host file, it does not go to the private DNS to see if this is legit. It just goes to that one DNS. And then, like I say, the IP address, you plug in here whatever you want. If you want it to be an invalid IP address, so people cannot go to the website, so if you don't want people going to Facebook or Yahoo or whatever, you could just put in 0.0.0.0. Or if you're trying to hack the system, you just plug in, whatever IP address it is you want them to go to, 208.67. Et cetera, et cetera. So with that, let's go over to a Windows 7 computer, and I will show you how this works. So now we are sitting at my Windows 7 professional desktop. So this is brand new, state of the art. So I'm not just hacking, some old piece of crap system. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to show you what happens when we go to Google now. So we are going to use DNS to change when somebody plugs in www.google.com. Instead of going to Google, they will go to a hacked website. So right now you see we're on CNN.com. And if I plug in www.google.com, you will see this is right now legitimate. So we go to Google. So when I type in www.google.com, we go to Google. Well, now we are going to change the hosts file. So instead of going to google.com, we are going to go to a website that says you have been hacked. Now again, I just created a little placeholder website that says you have been hacked. If you are a real hacker, you could put whatever amount of crap onto that website that you wanted to put. So basically understand that you are going to be sent right now to just a little placeholder website. It's up to you to get creative on how nasty you are. So we're just going to close this out now. And the tool we use to modify the hosts file is simply Notepad. So good old Notepad. Now the main thing is, since we are using Windows 7, we have to edit the hosts file as an administrator. So the easiest way to do this is when you're looking at the Notepad icon, you right click and then you actually run as administrator Notepad. So open Notepad up as the administrator. This is the easiest way to do it. And then you get this little, do you want to actually do this? And you say yes. And now you get a blank Notepad file. We don't want to do anything with this blank Notepad file. We now want to do File, and we want to do Open. And here we are going to go find the hosts file. So we go to the C directory, then we go to Windows, then we scroll down to System 32. Then we find drivers right here. Now in all this mess, you then find etc. Now, right now, you just see this hosts.txt. You don't want to deal with hosts.txt or anything.txt. The file name is simply hosts. So we go down, and right here, this is asking you what kind of file you're looking for, and you go down to all files. You now see hosts. So see that there's no .txt, not .doc, not .ini. It's simply only totally just hosts. So now we double click on this and we open up the hosts file. Now when you first open up the host file, what you will see generally is you'll see this 127.0.0.1, and that points to something called localhost. Anything.1 again points to localhost. Underneath you will see this was all created by Spybot Search and Destroy. It's a very good piece of anti-malware software, and this this is the protection I talked about. So if you try to go to www.007guard.com, it will simply send you to 127.0.0.1. 127.0.0.1 is what is called the loopback address. This is the IP address of your computer. So instead of going to 007guard.com, you will simply go to your computer and it will fail out. So these are all the things that were put in there to make it so you can't go to these domains. So this is a white hat. This is a good way of hacking your DNS. So if you try to go to any of these crap domains that you see right here, instead of actually going to the domain, you will simply loop back to your own computer and it will fail out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do black hat, let's say. So instead of doing something good, we are going to point people who are trying to go to www.google.com to our own hacked website. So the first thing you do is you put in the IP address of where you want the domain name to go to. So I have a local computer here, 10.1.10.2, and now I want www.google to go to that IP address versus whatever Google's IP address is. So when we save this, if I type in www.google.com, you'll go to 10.1.10.2. Now, let's say somebody goes to google.com. Well, we want to hack them too. So we put that in again, and then we just say Google. So whether or not they type in www.google.com or simply google.com, they will go to this IP address that I have plugged in here. Again, if you know anything about IP addresses, you know that 10.1.10.2 is a local address, but you could plug in a public IP address, 207.500. Well, I guess not 500, but 45.3.2 if you want. So this can be any IP address. Then all you do is you do File, and then you do Save. So then we minimize this. We then open up Firefox, and we see we're at cnn.com. Now if we type in www.google.com, so there's no tricks here. This is www.google.com. You hit enter. You have been hacked. So see, instead of going to Google, we've been directed to this hacker website. So that's all you have to do to hack DNS. Like I say, for the hosts file, you go in and change the host file like I did. But if this is public or private DNS, or I guess private DNS, all you would have to do is go to that private DNS server, change the IP address that Google gets pointed to, and this will happen too. This is how easy this is. So with that, let's go back out to the real world. See, so hacking DNS is really pretty easy. So I just showed you how to hack the hosts file. Again, that's really simple. Hacking a DNS server is just as simple. It just depends on what server you're dealing with. If you want to hack a Windows server, just go learn how DNS works on a Windows server, etc. Now, one of the ways that you can protect your systems or your network is by using an alternate public DNS service. So we talked about the public DNS service. So public DNS is what normally resolves IP addresses for things like websites, www.facebook.com, www.yahoo.com. These public DNS servers are not in your building. These public DNS servers are out in the cloud. So you're here, your building's here, you have your computer here, this has the host file on it. Then if the domain name can't be resolved in the host file, it then goes to the DNS server. If that can't be resolved, then it goes out to the cloud and it goes to one of these public DNS servers. Now, depending on what service you use, you are probably using the default public DNS servers for your ISP. So if you are using Comcast, if you are using Verizon, if you're using Quest, AT&T, whoever you're using, they all have their own public DNS servers. So when you set up your little DSL modem or cable modem or AdTran or whatever you set up, you most likely plugged in their public DNS information. So all that is they just gave you an IP address and you plugged it in, 108.55.44.1. I don't know, whatever it is, you plugged it in. Well, you do not have to use the public DNS servers of your ISP, your internet service provider. Although they give you those DNS servers to use, you can use alternate ones. So there's a company that came out that is very good called OpenDNS.org. What they do is they allow you to use the DNS servers, the public DNS servers, as a form of security. You can go in, you can create an account with them, you can do a bunch of stuff. The main thing is, if you point your public DNS servers to the DNS servers for OpenDNS.org, they will prevent users either on the computer or the network from going to bad sites. So, there's huge catalogs out there of websites that have viruses and malware and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, if one of the people on your network is trying to get to one of these bad sites, OpenDNS.org will prevent them from going there. So if they're trying to go to, let's say, a porn site, when they type in, iwantsex.com, instead of going to iwantsex.com, they will go and they will get a red X and say, you are not allowed to view this site. So this is a very good thing for protecting your networks against viruses, spyware, etc. The other good thing about this is a lot of times if you get a piece of virus or spyware on your computer, what makes it worse is it's on your computer, and that's bad enough, right? But it does things called phoning home. So your computer is here and it just got a virus. That's bad. Well, then it will use domain names to go out to websites and start pulling in more and more and more and more and more viruses. This is what will end up in totally killing your computer at some point. Well, if you use OpenDNS.org, when this tries to go out to the website, OpenDNS won't allow these connections to happen. So you still have that one little virus on there, but it's not able to go out and grab more viruses and shove it on the computer. So this is something to think about, is using alternate public DNS for your system. So you can plug in the alternate DNS into whatever your DHCP server is. So you just give this out to all the clients on the network. So instead of using AT&T's DNS server or Verizon's or Comcast, you will use something like OpenDNS.org. OpenDNS.org is kind of like the premier one out there, but there are other solutions if you want to do a Google search on it. I think OpenDNS.org is still free, so that's a good thing. But basically, what OpenDNS.org does is it creates a list of all these bad sites, all these sites that you don't want your employees to go to, you don't want your kids to go to, etc. And by using that DNS mapping, when somebody tries to go to iwantfreeporn.com, instead of being directed to the server that has iwantfreeporn.com, they will get redirected to a page that says you're not supposed to go there. So this is a way that you can really protect your systems. And I mean, this is worth as much as antivirus software for most companies. So let's talk about the DNS hacking attack. So we decided that we want to hack some companies. We want to redirect the people in these companies off to our nefarious little web servers. Well, in order to do this attack, the first thing that we have to do is we have to create a web server somewhere. I would not suggest you build this little web server in your house and host it in your house, because there are IP addresses and login and all that. But depending on where you want to set up the web server, you need to set up a web server to redirect all these poor victims to. So like I say, this web server could be up in some cloud computer. This could be off in China. It's got off in Quebec. You could set this up. You could hack into a corporate network and set up a web server that they don't realize. But basically, you need to set up a web server that is going to host all the really yucky crap that you want to give to your victims. So, this will have, viruses and spyware and all of that stuff. So the first thing that needs to happen is you need to create a web server that's gonna present this stuff. Then the next thing that you need to do is you need to redirect users to this web server. Now, in order to do this, you can do this a number of ways. Now, the first way that was really big back when XP Service Pack 1 was around was to futz with the hosts file. So back in the day, what would happen is you would go to a website. That website was able to automatically change the hosts file. So when you went to the website, you might click on a link, and instead of going somewhere, what would happen is that link would set off a script that would add all this information to the host file. So it would say facebook.com goes here, yahoo.com goes here, myspace.com goes here. So basically that script would change the host file. So that's something that you can do. So you can create an automatic script and somehow get the people that are going to a website or such to run that script. Nowadays, it's a little harder with Windows 7, but remember, all you have to do is convince somebody to click the yes button, and Windows 7 will allow scripts to run. So if you tell them, click this link and then allow the script to run, you can have it so it automatically changes the host file. Now, this isn't as significant a thing anymore because it is harder to change the host files. Like I say, back in Windows XP Service Pack 1, this was something that was very, very easy to do. Now it is a little more difficult to get done. So to change the host file, you can either have a script that runs, or you can sit down and manually change the host file, depending on why you'd want to do that. If you're doing good things, you can just sit down at a computer and change the host file. Then the next way that you can get and mess with everybody on a network is to corrupt the private DNS server. So the private DNS server is the Windows server that's generally sitting on your network. So most of the networks, if you are if it's, you've got 20 or 30 people, you probably have a Windows server on the network, and it is probably hosting the DNS. Well, there's something called war driving. And this you may have heard from for hacking Wi-Fi networks. Basically, what war driving is you go around in an area and you look for open Wi-Fi networks, wireless networks. Well, if you can hack in to one of these open wireless networks, and then if the security on that Windows server is very bad, let's say they don't have a password or such, you can easily hack in to that Windows server and then just change the DNS settings that are in it. So within the DNS server, as long as you know what you're doing, you just go in and you say, okay, I want Facebook to point here, I want MySQL to point here. Then what will happen is all the computers on the network, when they go to ask for DNS resolution, it will go to that server and it will give them the information. So that's another way to hack the DNS and point them up to this bad, evil, website. So basically, with this, you can either do war driving, is where you're trying to go around and pick up wireless signals, or you can go into many buildings, and most of the time, network plugs that are not being used have not been disconnected from the switch back in the server room. So if you go out, let's say you're sitting in the conference room or the waiting room in a business, you may be able to plug your little laptop into one of the plugs that's sitting in that waiting room and be able to hack into the DNS server for that entire network. So that's what you can do. You can change the individual settings within the private DNS. Now, the next thing that you can do that would be really nasty on the private DNS is if you've dealt with DNS with computers and servers, you know that there is a primary and a secondary DNS entry. So basically, your computer will go to the primary DNS server. If it can't find the information it needs from the primary DNS server, it will go to the secondary DNS server. Well, if you can get into the server, and you can corrupt, or you can put in your own information, you can make the primary server DNS point to your own DNS server that's sitting out in the internet. So basically that way you control the server and everything. So instead of having to put in individual entries into the DNS server that you're hacking into, you can just plug in that you want the primary DNS server to be your DNS server that's sitting out on the internet, and then you can modify and edit that DNS server out on the internet as well as you please. So this is how you can hack the DNS, if you're planning an attack on somebody. So basically you go in, the first way you can do it is you can change the hosts file. You can either do this using a script, again, if you're attacking the computers with that, XP pre-service pack 1, this is very easy to do. Now, even though it's a little harder, it can be done by using a script. You can do this manually, so you manually go in and you edit the host file. The next thing is that you can hack the private DNS for the entire network. So this means either through war driving or etc., you go in, you hack their DNS server, and you can either put in individual entries for everything that you want them to go to, or you can simply hack their primary DNS, and you can say, I want the primary DNS to point to a DNS server that you've already created. So you create your own DNS server out on the web, and that DNS server then points everything back to the hack. So these are the ways that you can attack DNS, and like I say, it works really well, good or bad. This works really well. The main thing is, for security purposes, with private and DNS and all this, this is why username and account security is so important. Is if you are not logged in as the administrator, it is very difficult to accidentally modify the hosts file. If you are logged in as the administrator, it is very easy to do. So if a normal user, if a user account tries to modify the host file, it will not happen. Windows will not allow it to happen. If the administrator accidentally or through a script modifies the host file, it will happen. Again, with securing the server, if you have a very weak password or if you have no password at all, they can very easily get into your server and hack your server. Whereas, if you have the whole long, complicated passwords, etc., it's very difficult to do. So, but this, in a nutshell, is how you use DNS for an attack. So that was a class hacking DNS. So as you should know, basically all DNS is mapping domain names to IP addresses. That's all it does. So all we're doing is making that domain name go to a different IP address than it should go to. So instead of going to facebook.com servers, you go to your server. Now, if you hack DNS right, this can be as either blatant and everybody will know about it, or it can be almost invisible. If you understand web programming, if you understand how web servers work and operate, like I say, you can take over something like a chasebank.com website, or you can make a website that looks so much like a bank's website that people will not know the difference. So they will go to the website and they will plug in their username and password, and you will be able to grab it that easily. So it's very, very easy to do that. If DNS is hacked, you can really screw with people really, really, really hard. Or on the other hand, you can make it just very blatant and bold-faced. You can, if you're trying to prevent people from going to Facebook or MySpace or whatever, you can point them to a website that says, "Hey, get back to work." It depends on you. Basically, like I say, hacking DNS at this level is very, very easy. I mean, there are higher levels up there, and that's something for computer science, and we'll probably go into it at some other point. But at this level, it's very easy. All you do is you change where the domain name goes. That's all it is. Remember, you go from the host file, so the computer looks at the host file, then it looks at the local DNS, and then it looks at the public DNS. This is how everything works. So if you're only trying to corrupt one computer, you do it at the host file level. If you're trying to corrupt all the computers on the network, then you do it at the local DNS. Again, this local DNS, it may be a Windows server, it may be some kind of Linux server, it may be a Linksys router, it might be a Verizon router. It's, essentially, whatever is handing out your DHCP IP addresses should be what your DNS server is, and so how you hack that or how you modify that will depend upon the system. Again, for good or bad, you can also use alternate public DNS. So, like I say, when you go and you start using your web service from either Verizon or Quest or Comcast or whoever you are using, they will tell you to plug in specific DNS servers that are their DNS servers out on the web. Well, just because they tell you those are the ones to use doesn't mean you have to use those. So you could use companies like OpenDNS.org. They have protective DNS servers where if you try to go to, like I say, ilikeporn.com, it will not allow you to go there. Or you can set up your own nefarious public web server to send people to wherever you want. So that's something to think about, is you can change your public DNS servers out that your network uses on the internet. You don't just have to use Comcast or Verizon's and such. So that's really, all this class is. Like I say, it's pretty simple, like a lot of hacking. As long as you have a little bit of understanding, as long as you understand how TCP/IP works, essentially, then these are pretty easy attacks to do. Again, you can do it for good, you can do it for bad. I'm just telling you how all this stuff works. So, as you know, I am Eli, the Computer Guy, over here for everymanit.com. Again, this was Hacking DNS, and I look forward to seeing you at the next class.